Hello, everybody. Good to see you all, or I can see lots of names. I can see a few faces. Nice to see your faces. Nice to see names. And I think there's quite a few of us here in the call today. So you're very welcome. And just one or two more just still joining, I think. And actually, I think my screen's just frozen up, so I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes to sort itself out. And we've got chat running as well. So if you want to put something up into the chat there to everybody, you're welcome to do that during the call. So welcome everybody. I'm Douglas Roberts. I'm the Education Development Officer at the Scottish Council on Archives. And this is our number 3, 10-20-30 session on video and audio podcasts. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at the 10-minute video that I put up, which was 11 minutes and 29 seconds, I think. So pretty close to 10 minutes. And I'm aiming for 20 minutes to just talk through in a little bit more detail about podcasts this morning. And then there's a chance, about 30 minutes, for us to have a chat about anything that's come up in the webinar or anything that you'd like to talk about in relation to podcasts. Just to let you know that we're recording this session, and this, along with the 10-minute video, will form part of the web offering that we put up. So this will go up on YouTube eventually. All the links that I mention in today's session will go up on our website as well, and you'll get a mail out with some information that sort of summarizes everything that I've been talking about this morning. I'm going to switch over to a slide here. There we go. And I'm just going to rearrange a few things on my screen so that I can actually see what I'm doing here. So this is what I'm going to be talking about this morning. Just briefly, why podcasts, why they could be of use to us in archives, how to go about choosing and creating content for a podcast, and also how to structure a podcast episode and a podcast series. A few notes on equipment and software that you can use. There's a whole variety of software and equipment that you can use, but I'm just going to talk through some basic equipment that could be useful to you. How to get a podcast online and what the difference between simply creating an audio or a video file and creating a podcast series is, and then how to get started, and then we'll have time for a discussion. So why podcasts? The same thing that I've said before about outreach. Outreach is essential for making our services visible and relevant to the outside world. If we don't tell people what we're about, archives can be a mysterious thing for people. And unlike museums, where people can come in and browse, with archives are a little bit more mysterious to people. So podcasts are a very good way of getting information out to quite a diverse audience. It's a very well-established platform. Millions of people listen to podcasts, or they watch them. and the systems are set up to enable people to access them all over the world and to access them in quite a convenient way. You'll be familiar, I'm sure most of you, with podcasts. These are radio or television programs. So to let somebody else in there. Which are produced by companies, individuals, teams on any number of subjects. They can be dramatic, they can be informative, they can be entertaining. You name the subject, there's a podcast about it. And the systems are set up to offer these to people on devices, on listening devices, on your phones, and to listen to different episodes as they come up in the correct order. They're very simple to produce and to maintain. Once you get started on producing a podcast series, you can continue in the same theme for a while, and then you can switch to another theme and present some other kind of information. So I think podcasting is it's a very versatile, very accessible, very familiar format for people. There's an opportunity to address a large audience around the world, nationally, but also very locally. So if you want to talk about your archives content for your particular local area, a particular street, a particular building, you're going to get a bunch of people who are interested in that. And Scottish archives have a particular appeal around the world. Scotland's history has appeal everywhere. And so I think you're onto a winner before you start with when you start talking about Scotland with an international audience. So how do you go about creating some content for a podcast? Well, the content's up to you. Decide what you think might appeal locally. I would suggest that you start local. Think about what your local audience is going to be and what they're going to be interested in. And you'll have a knowledge already of what people coming to your reading room are interested in finding out about. So decide what you think might appeal locally, but also consider what interests you about archives. What brought you into the profession in the first place? Because if you share your enthusiasm for your collections and for your job, it's infectious. If you simply talk about what you love about your job or what you love about your records, you'll find that people get interested. If they're not interested, they won't listen, and then you'll know because the statistics come back, and then you can shift it. But I would suggest that you look at those two things. What drew you into the profession, or what are you interested in, and what do you think appeals locally? You can talk about archiving as a profession, how your job works and what you do, or you can talk about issues and special interests within the archiving world. And you will find an audience for that as well. But you can also talk about records and the history that they contain. Some of the podcasts that we'll have a look at in a minute are about that. They're about the records and the history, the stories and the people and the places that are contained in the records. Be careful to consider who your audience is. There's a lot of archives podcasts out there that are talking to other archivists. And there's a place for that. But here we're looking specifically at how to use podcasts to outreach to your local community, to make yourself visible locally. So by all means, produce a podcast for other archivists, but think about outreach, think about trying to widen your appeal to an audience and to make yourselves visible. Once you've identified a target audience, think carefully about what those people might be interested in hearing about and looking at. Video podcasts can be quite powerful because you can put in images, slideshows of images from your archives, as well as film of yourself, of course. Podcast software tends to recommend similarly themed podcasts to people who listen to a different one. So someone will listen to a particular podcast, and then they'll get 4 recommendations along the bottom. And so if you do a podcast about a particular subject, you'll find that you get an interesting audience that comes in, and you don't know where they've come from. It's usually because it's been recommended. So be open to people discovering you and then finding out from them what they're interested in hearing about. When you're thinking about podcasting, think in terms of episodes and series. So in the same way that a television series is a collection of episodes, each on a particular aspect of a subject, that's really how podcasts tend to be put together. You can do one-offs, but it's useful to think in terms of a series, because that's the way the people who use podcasts. They can be loosely linked around a theme, or they can be tightly linked in a sort of a build-up of information. If they're dramatic, then you can tell a story with a cliffhanger at the end of each one. The episode structure means that we can be quite specific about things. You don't have to produce a podcast which is a whole great sweep of information about your service. It can be about one record or one individual, one building in your local area, and then work out from there. And you might have a theme of local buildings or local individuals. The content doesn't have to be complicated. Reading aloud the contents of records like court depositions or diaries or letters can be fascinating for people. And that only requires selection from you. So don't feel that you have to script every podcast and carefully craft it. You can simply say, today I'm going to read to you from these court records from 1756 in our local area, and I want you to listen for this and this and this, and then just read stuff aloud. That's surprisingly popular, actually. Get ideas of what you could do from existing podcasts. If you don't listen to podcasts already, it's worth signing up to a few and having a listen and just seeing how other people do it. There are no new ideas under the sun, so just copy other people's ideas, and again, go with what you find appealing and interesting. There are lots of different formats. So the interview format is a popular one. Having 2 voices gives it a little bit of variety. Puzzles, cliffhangers, a bit of exposition and explanation, some questioning, mix it up a little bit. So think of it as like making a radio program. Your podcast doesn't have to stick with one style throughout. So you might say, today's interview is with so-and-so, and that's going to take 7 minutes. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this record that I mentioned last time. And then there's a puzzle at the end, and I'll give you the answer to it next time. So there you've got a format for a radio program. And that's really all a podcast is. Here's a few random ideas that I picked up from just looking at a series of archives-based podcasts. Talking about your job. Quite a lot of people will be interested in that. Crimes and misdemeanors. People love hearing about what crimes were committed in the past and how crimes were dealt with. So local police and court records are a really good source of information. A building through time, local property, uses and changes through time. Interesting people, of course. So if you've got interesting individuals in your area, find some records about them and then display them, talk about them, read from them, even dramatize them. There's the old chestnut of what happened today, 400 years ago, what happened this week, this month. School logbooks and board minutes have actually got some great material in them as well. Again, just for reading aloud or doing a little survey across, say, 5 years or 10 years, and to say, well, this is what changed in this period, or here's a comparison across a significant period of history. If there are things going on nowadays where you can find an archived echo of that. So current affairs, obviously at the moment, any information about the 1918-1919 flu pandemic it's probably of interest to people, just to hear a little bit of comparison with how we're dealing with things now. Creating dialogues from exchanges of letters is a sort of a staple of drama, but you can do it nicely with archives. You just get two voices, get a microphone or two microphones, and just record yourselves reading it back and forward. And demonstrating different archiving processes as well. How do you go about preserving? How do you go about creating a box? How do you go about shelving things and accessioning, deaccessioning things? I would suggest, if you're going to have a go at starting with podcasting, is dip your toe in the water first. So just start off small scale. A 15-minute podcast is a good length of time to try and produce. 10 to 15 minutes is fine. And plan, say, a series of 3. If you do a series of 3, you can always get out. If you discover that actually you don't really like doing this after all, then you haven't committed yourself to a huge number. Start off, rather than trying to start off with video, I would suggest start off with audio and some images in a slideshow, and just talk over the images, unless you're comfortable with filming yourself. I'll talk a little bit more about filming yourself later, and the difficulty of looking at the camera and looking at a script at the same time. When you produce your first couple of podcasts, send them out to friends and colleagues and just get some feedback. And if someone asks you to give feedback, be honest about it and tell them how they can improve it. Working together is really helpful with this kind of stuff. And like I said before, copy other people's ideas. Have a look at established podcasts and look for the good ideas. Look for the things which come up over and over again that are inspiring. Now, there's lots of podcasts around. There's millions of them. I've picked out 4 for us just to have a quick look. So I'm just going to switch over to wherever it is. Here we go. I've got some different podcasts just for us to look at here. This one, Stories of Scotland. You might have come across this one before. These are very engaging. Jenny McHaggis and Annie McNeap are your presenters, and they take records related to something or other. So here they've got the Northern Lights and the Battle of Flodden. They've got Burns Night, and they had one about Yule traditions in the Highlands. But there's lots and lots and lots of episodes of these, and they're very entertaining. They're told in a kind of a light, jaunty kind of a manner, with a bit of humor and a bit of irreverence, but always referencing back to the records that they're using, which is what makes it a bit more serious for as an archives podcast. The second one here is called More Podcast, Less Process. Now, this is actually one that is made for archivists to listen to. It's in-depth interviews with individuals in the archiving and museums world about their speciality and their experience. It's really well produced. They're really interesting interviews. Some of them are a bit long. They're over an hour long, so you really got to dedicate yourself to it. But really fascinating conversations. The website. Now, just to clarify here, what I'm looking at here is websites related to the podcast, but this is not usually where you sign up to a podcast. You would sign up using something like Apple Podcasts or another podcasting piece of software. But a lot of the more established ones have their own websites, like this one here. The next one, this one's from the Archives Canada, and this is called the Virtual Gramophone. And they play old gramophone records, and they explain where they came from and what they're about. A lot of it's music, but they talk about the collection that they've come from and why it was collected, and they give a bit of history about how the records are preserved. So these are actual gramophone records that they're playing. Quite a gentle listen, quite a pleasant, and some really interesting, unusual music. This one's called An Archivist's Tale. This is another example of a podcast that's for archivists to listen to, and it's conversations between archivists talking about their work and their passion. So you can see here how they care for the historical record and present the storied past. So it's these two, Karen Trivette and Jeff Huth, who present it, and they find somebody to talk to every week. And you can see they're up to 122 episodes as of last October. I'm on the website here. If I wanted to sign up for this, I could click on this link here, which says listen on Apple Podcasts, and that would take me to the Apple podcasting software, and then I would click subscribe. I'll explain about subscribing in a minute. The last one I want to mention is this one here. It's called The Last Archive, and this is presented in a kind of 1930s radio drama style. It's quite slick, but it's also quite a meaty listen. Jill Lepore is the historian who kind of runs this, and they produce a series of podcasts that investigate how we know what we know about the past, and they present it as a kind of investigation into a mystery, gumshoe detective stuff. It's really well produced, and it's worth listening to, particularly for the way that they mix narration with sound effects, and a little bit of scripted drama. So let's just switch back to here. So how do we go about structuring a podcast episode? So here's one suggestion, just for a fairly conventional and simple episode structure, and this is your storybook structure. So an introduction and an outline of what's coming up, and then if this is the next one in the series, just a quick recap of where we came from, in case someone hasn't listened to the last one, and then present your main content. That could be, say you're doing a 15-minute podcast, I'd suggest that the main content is about 8 minutes of that. Then do a summary of what you've just gone over. It's always good to reiterate. In education, it's a good principle to just recap and reiterate. And then flag up what's coming up in the next episode, and invite people to send you in feedback and to subscribe to the podcast. What subscribing means, people often worry that means you're paying for it. You tend not to pay for podcasts. So subscribing means that you are letting the software know that you want to listen to all of the episodes of that podcast. And the software will then serve up the episodes in the order that they're produced. And you can select whether you keep all of the episodes or whether you automatically delete each episode once you've listened to it and get the next one, because obviously it takes up a lot of space on your device. And then say goodbye after that. So there's a sort of basic structure of how to set up a podcast episode. For a series, I suggested before that you start with a series of 3. You can always extend a series of 3, but by starting with 3, you're not committing yourself to a great long, arduous production schedule. I would suggest you start out with one a month, so that you've got plenty of time to produce each one. You can always increase the frequency, but one a month means that you're not feeling too pressured to get each one done. Within a series, stay focused on a theme. So the one I mentioned earlier, the last archive, they pick up on a particular subject, and then they'll do 4 episodes on that subject and come to a conclusion at the end, and then they'll announce another subject and they'll do a new series on that. If you're making changes to the structure, changes to the theme, flag it up in advance. Podcast listeners tend to listen to or watch podcasts in the same way that we watch television series. So you always want to know if there's a change coming up. Now, here's a few suggestions for the style that you use in a podcast. I would suggest that you write a script. Now, how you use the script is up to you. You can just read it off. You may find that it sounds like somebody reading. So it's worth reading it out a few times until you get used to saying it as if you're just making it up. You may prefer to write a script write script notes and then sort of freestyle from there. Or you might be confident enough just to riff into a microphone and see what happens. A monologue is the simplest kind of podcast, just one person talking, and you can always intersperse it with sound recordings and sound effects. An interview, 2 people talking, gives a little bit more variety, and that's a very popular format that you'll see when you listen to podcasts. You'll see the interview as a popular way forward. Audio clips. So introducing in the same way that a DJ would introduce music, you can introduce a series of audio clips, which could be people reading from records, or it could be actual sound archives. Reading aloud. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, reading from records. I see the screen's frozen up, but hopefully you're still hearing me. Oh, that's okay. Radio drama. If you're feeling a little bit more confident about this, get 3 or 4 colleagues together and create a little piece of radio drama. Create some characters based on some archive records, and see if you can make something a little more dramatic. Again, have a listen to the last archive for some examples of this. She creates little scenes that are acted out. Sound effects. Just give a little bit of texture. Sound effects can be easily downloaded from YouTube or from lots of sites where sound effects are available for free. Music, just be careful with music because there are so many copyright issues around music, so make sure that you're using copyright-free music. If you just Google copyright-free music, you'll find a whole lot of music that very kind people produce for you to use in podcasts. So you might have a piece of introductory music and a piece of music to play it out, for example. If you're using video, you might do a practical demonstration of something. So just set the camera up and then demonstrate how you go about folding or unfolding something, or preserving or cleaning something, for example. So equipment. I mentioned in the 10-minute video that really all you need for creating a podcast is something to record your voice, something to capture your voice, and something to record it and store it. You also need something to edit. So a tablet or a laptop or even your phone is sufficient to do an audio recording or a video recording. I would suggest that getting an external microphone helps quite a bit. A USB microphone is the simplest type of microphone to use. Now the one I've got here is called a Blue Yeti, and that's the one that you can actually see in the picture. You can see in my little screen there that this is the thing here. So it's quite a big thing, but it just sits on the desk and it captures your voice. It means that you can get your voice a lot closer to the microphone. Laptop microphones and tablet microphones tend to be quite far away from you when you've got the camera far enough away to see you. And then you get echo from the room, whereas a USB microphone like this will pick up your voice more exclusively, and it'll screen out things like laptop noise and like in here, there's a fridge over there that's making a noise, but you won't be able to hear it in the microphone, whereas my laptop probably would pick it up. If you're using a microphone and you're right up close to it like this, you sometimes get popping sounds. So you can get a thing called a pop shield, which is that little picture there. You can see that on the gooseneck that comes around, and it's really just a film on a circle that sits in front of the microphone, and it stops that popping sound that you get when you say the letters P and T. An external webcam. The webcams on laptops and tablets are pretty good these days, but if you get an external web camera, again USB, then you can get HD or 1080, which just slightly improves the video quality. It's a good idea to get some extra lights as well. An overhead light is actually a terrible look on the face. So I've got an overhead light on here, but I've got two other lights on here. So I've got one there and one over here, and then a light over the side there as well, so that I look fantastic in my setting. But if I had just the one light, a lot of people think that they should do this when they do a podcast, and actually it's just not, it doesn't work. It's not a good look. So don't have a light shining on your face when you're doing video. But it's essential to have good lighting. Otherwise, your camera just simply cannot pick you up properly, and you end up with all this graininess. As for editing, I mentioned in the 10-minute video that there's free software out there, which is all that you need, really. If you're lucky enough to have the Adobe suite or something like that on your laptop, then by all means use Adobe Audition or Premiere Pro or something like that. But laptops come with built-in software. With a Mac, you've got the QuickTime, and with Windows 10, you've got the Camera app, which is good enough for recording video. I would suggest this piece of software that I've mentioned in the slide here, OpenShot. It's a fully fledged video editor. It's completely free, and it's pretty easy to use. The website has actually got a number of instructional videos on there as well. And if in any doubt, YouTube is your friend. Just go onto YouTube, type in, how do I use OpenShot? And some kind person has produced a blow-by-blow account of exactly how to use it and what to do with it. Audacity is a kind of go-to piece of free audio editing software. It's a little bit clunky to use until you get used to it. So I would suggest, if you're going to use Audacity, watch a couple of videos on YouTube on how to use it first, because you'll find that you go to do something and then something happens and you don't understand how it's done that, because the controls are not always intuitive. Now, I've mentioned here as well something called QPrompter, which is a free on-screen teleprompter. If you're reading into a camera, you end up with your eyes looking at the screen below the camera or above the camera. So one of the ways around this is to have a thing called a teleprompter. Now, if you've got a proper teleprompter, it's got a mirror in it, and you can look right at the camera and you can see all the words running up in front. You can build one of these things if you're crafty with duct tape and so on. But the QPrompter thing simply takes your script and it runs it very slowly up the screen so that it's sitting just here, just below the camera, so that if you sit back far enough, it looks like you're looking at the camera, whereas you're actually following the words that are just below it. So it's just a suggestion. If you find that you're trying to record yourself and you end up looking like this all the time as you're speaking, and you think the video looks terrible, just try using a QPrompter. So just a brief explanation about how podcasts work. A podcast is a file on your computer. So it's an audio file or a video file. Now, in order for this to work as a podcast, it has to be hosted by someone online. So you have to get it out online. So YouTube is a hosting service, for example, and you'll be familiar with how that works. So somebody makes a video, they upload it to YouTube, and YouTube makes it available. Podcasts work slightly differently in that they are hosted as a series of episodes, and they're served up by a hosting service in the order that they're intended to be. And the hosting service also automatically deletes the old ones off the device. So you need to use a hosting service in order to have a podcast available. If you want to just create your own channel on Facebook or YouTube, you can do that. But people can't subscribe to your podcast then. They just have to remember to come back and look at the next one. Now, Spotify is a service that an awful lot of people nowadays use, and Spotify has a whole podcasting branch to it. And I discovered when I was researching this that they have a piece of software called Anchor, which is a free hosting and distribution service, which is linked to Spotify. And I dug around to try and find out why it was free and how that they could make this work. But seemingly it's because they want to encourage people to use podcasts. They get their funding through some advertising and sponsorship. And so they offer this service for free. I'll put a link to the website, which has a very good sort of here's how you get started set of videos. If you're not interested in Anchor, or you find it a bit difficult to work, or your authority blocks it or something, then have a look at Podbean. It's probably the most used podcasting service in the world. It's a paid service, but it offers a free tier for up to 5 hours of content. So if you're producing short web podcasts, you can actually produce quite a lot of these before you get to 5 hours. And what you can do is you can delete the old ones so that you always stay within the 5 hours, and then you can keep it free. So to differentiate between, say, Anchor and Podbean and Spotify and Apple, Spotify and Apple are the podcasting service that you would use to sign up to a podcast, but they don't actually host it. They are simply a directory. So this is why you need a hosting service as well as a listing service. You can get a lot more information about all of this from a site called Podcast Insights, which is there to get people interested in podcasting. They've got paid courses that you can sign up to, but they've also got a lot of free information on the site. And I'll put a link to that in the information that goes out to you. So just to sum up what I've been talking about here, choose a theme and an episode structure, and then plan to do, I would suggest, a series of 3 to start with. Get some equipment and software together, sign up to a hosting service, have a look at Anchor, see if that works for you. Otherwise, have a look at Podbean. Sign up to the hosting service, and then write yourself a script and record your podcast, and then edit and check it. And then use, say, Anchor to upload it. The Anchor service will take you through the whole process of uploading and putting metadata on it and giving it a name and numbering the episodes. I would suggest that you make 2 episodes before you start publicizing it. So that you've got one in hand always. And then once you've done that and you decide that you like podcasting, just rinse and repeat. All right. That's all I've got to say. So we can stop and we can have a little conversation. So I've just put some questions up on here. Just to get us started, but really the floor is yours to ask each other questions about your experience of podcasting, what's inspiring you to give it a try, why you came along today. What podcasts have you listened to? I've only mentioned 4, but there are millions of them out there. And what are any issues that you think you might face in doing this? And then what else do we need to know?
Douglas, it's Phil Astley from Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Archives.
Hi,
Yeah.
Phil.
Hi there. I found that really interesting. We've kind of dipped our toe into the water because we're part of archives, art gallery and museums in Aberdeen, and AAGM has a YouTube channel. So we have put together one or two, they're kind of, I guess you would call them podcasts, as you were suggesting earlier on. They're not purely audio. They are, they're slides that accompany the audio as well. So I found them remarkably easy to put together using Microsoft Stream.
Oh yes.
Which is part of the 365 Teams package.
Yes.
But when you were speaking, it kind of inspired me to think about how we might broaden what we're offering. And there's the idea of a 3-part series and a conversation. I can see a project that we've been doing with the University of Aberdeen is something that would fit that really, really well. But I'm just wondering whether you had any ideas about, how we might create that conversational style in the current climate where we're working at home. Would it have to be just kind of, obviously we can't replicate being in a room together and speaking with 2 or 3 people, but would it have to be down to people recording themselves separately and editing the package together?
Style when we're in this kind of environment, I think it's really about recording a call like this. So set up a Zoom call with somebody else and then record it. Okay. The easiest way to do that is within Zoom itself, or if you're using Teams or Skype, that facility's there, and then use that recording. You can do the video recording and then just extract the audio. But I'd suggest using that, but make sure that each person on the call has got a decent microphone, because otherwise you end up with a difference between the sound of the different people, and then that can be quite distracting. Yeah,
that was a really useful tip, as was the lighting one. And you do look fantastic, Douglas.
I'm aware of that. Yeah. Just a point to make for all of us who wear glasses. You will see advertised something called a ring light, which is literally, it's like a donut ring, and it's got a light all the way around it. And a lot of YouTubers use these because when you film yourself with them, it creates a little circle on your eye and it kind of looks quite natural. But if you wear glasses, you end up with 2 great big light circles on your eyes, and they look and there's no way around it. So don't get a ring light, and in fact, don't shine lights at your glasses at all, because they just end up reflecting. And anyone else?
Hi. I'm still invisible because I'm not in a situation to be seen yet, but
okay. Hi, Amanda.
Actually, I'm a volunteer with a women's group, and I have done interviews with artists that I've done on Zoom, and I've recorded them, and we're now turning them into wee podcasts.
Right, so good.
This is great. I'm going to listen into this and get some more hints and tips on how to do that, how to do it better. Yeah, so that's what we've been doing.
And what are you using to do the editing?
Well, someone else has been doing the editing out the group. I don't know what she's used, but I thought I need to be able to do this myself. So, yeah. But we haven't had microphones or anything like that. It was just, this is only our second interview, so the first one's been almost like a trial run. But that's what we did. We just recorded the me interviewing her as an MP4, and then we've extracted the MP3, and now we're editing it. So,
Okay.
so I thought I'd listen in today to try and improve our podcasts.
Just a suggestion about editing audio. MP4 is fine for editing video, but I would suggest if you can extract the audio as a WAV file, WAV file, rather than an MP3, because every time you save an MP3, it strips more data out of it and it reduces the quality. Whereas if you edit a WAV file and then convert it to an MP3 at the end, it's a lot more effective.
Fabulous, thank you.
There's a couple of comments there in the chat. Thank you, Samantha, for the couple of recommendations there. Shortwave and the indicator. Yeah, I take your point about professional podcasts, and you listen to too many of these and you think, oh, I can never do that, and it ends up putting you off. But so yeah, don't be put off by listening to professional ones. And Squadcast, I haven't come across Squadcast. Joe, what is that? What is that for listening or for creating, or what's it for?
As far as I understand, it's for recording, and
right.
It is a subscription site, but
Right.
it sounds like it's pretty good for recording a number of people, so in a kind of interview or a kind of conversation situation, because it records all of the audio separately. So if you're having a problem with one person's microphone, then you can kind of turn them down when they're not speaking, if you like. So it kind of is. It sounds as if it's pretty good for that sort of thing. I just wondered if anybody had used it and whether it's worth the money, basically.
Has anybody come across it? I've just looked up the website just now. It looks fairly new. They've got a big section at the bottom with coming soon. So it looks like they've probably launched not that long ago. I mean, I'm making a guess here. Nice slick website. Let's see what it costs.
Yeah, they've got some good kind of videos that they've put up of how to use it. So it looks fairly straightforward.
Okay, and it's $9 US a month, and you get 2 hours of audio recordings per month for that.
Yeah, which from what you say, if you're doing a 15-minute session, then that would be more than enough, really.
Well, it would, except that a 15-minute podcast may involve 40 minutes of recording, because by the time you edit things down.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that suggestion, Joe. And Heather, headset microphones. Yes, most headset microphones now. You kind of cheap ones out of the bargain bins. I wouldn't bother. So you go for a reputable make. Logitech makes some pretty good microphones, including headset ones. I would suggest not using Bluetooth microphones, because they can, these ones that kind of wireless ones that sit in, or the ones that are on the Bluetooth headphones, and they've got the microphone built in. I'd suggest not using those for podcasts, because it tends to be phone quality rather than good voice quality. Helen, in a lot of the succession planning. Well, yes. I don't know. Any suggestions into that?
In my kind of limited experience of that, Douglas, I think you know, there are always kind of strengths within a team, and I think some people are more kind of natural in front of a camera, or indeed in front of a microphone, than others, and it might be a case of you know, you've just got to try and work out who is the best in your team to do that kind of thing. I do tend to find that some people are very self-deprecating about it as well, and
Yes.
you know, the way that you think you might come across is very different from the way that other people perceive you, and I think
Yes.
that's very true for, you know, there's a member of our team who is absolutely fantastic at telling stories, but you know, he's very modest about it, you know, but he can put things across in a very engaging way, and I think you've really got to play to the strengths of your team. I know that doesn't really kind of directly address Helen's point there about succession planning, but I think, you know, maybe mixing things up as well. I mean, you mentioned having two voices in a podcast, and I think that is something that works really well. And you know, we've done that in physical talks before, where we've used two presenters to help keep the audience's attention. I think that division of kind of effort and labor helps with people's attention.
I agree. I think as soon as you've got a conversation going, suddenly it's a lot more interesting to listen to. We enjoy listening to interaction. If you've got a good voice for presentation and you've got a little bit of practice at it, then a monologue podcast can be quite engaging. But you'll find if you're producing a 15-minute podcast, you probably do have to do 30 minutes of recording and then edit it down. I agree with Joe's comment there about getting as many people involved as possible. Give people a go. If you're feeling kind of awkward about, you know, performance, as it were, in front of a microphone or in front of a camera, definitely start with a microphone and definitely start with a script. And just you write the script in a way that you would speak, and then just read it out into the microphone. And the first couple of times you do it, it'll sound a bit wooden, but then just work at it. Some of those basics of performance, like making sure that you take a deep breath, that you pause, that you lift your voice up and then take it back down again, and try and avoid the monotone, and just listen to how you come across. Whenever we listen to ourselves on a recording, we think that's not my voice. That doesn't sound. Is that how I sound? And because our voices always sound different to ourselves than they do to other people. If you want to get an idea of what your voice sounds like to other people, put your thumbs in like this and put them onto these bones here, and then talk for a little while, and you'll hear your voice as other people hear it rather than the way you hear it. It's worth just giving that a try.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah. Hello, good. Alex. You can hear me. I'm Alex. I'm an honorary archivist, not a professional one, and I'm a historian.
We're honoured.
I do it for a sailing club in the south of England, and also I write histories of organisations. I was just wondering. Every organisation I've written a history of has had a problem actually taking the business of having an archive at all seriously. I mean, their archive has tended to consist of old boxes from digestive biscuits with dead flies and yellowing bits of paper.
You can hear the cringing going on even behind those muted microphones.
Usually somewhere quite damp or with a boiler nearby. And the whole. I was just wondering to focus my question: is there, among all these the podcasts that you recommend, are there some that really say in a nice simple way to people who are not archivists what an archive can do and how important it is to try and keep your archives well? I mean, actually to have an archive rather than just boxes of stuff.
I'll ask if anyone's got some suggestions from the team here, but from the couple of podcasts that I mentioned myself, the two I would suggest having a look at are the More Podcast, Less Process one, and the one that says An Archivist's Tale. Now, in both of these, you've got archivists actually talking about their jobs and why their jobs are important and why it's important to have an archive.
Right.
At a slightly more entertaining level, the Last Archive podcast is about demonstrating how important it is to have accurate records in order to understand history. Otherwise, we cannot know what happened in the past with any accuracy.
Yeah.
So those three I would suggest probably have material in them. But any suggestions from the team here?
I've just seen one from Heather. That's great. Heather Needham from Hampshire. Yes, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. Really useful. Thank you so much. A great talk. Very inspiring. Really wonderful.
Well, it's great to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Alex may also be interested to know of the Scottish Council on Archives Community Archives Heritage Group.
Yeah.
I know if you're down in the south of England, Alex, it may not be kind of directly relevant, but they are doing a series of kind of online talks about their kind of how-to talks about how to catalogue photographs, digital preservation, that type of thing. Yeah. So the SCA, I think it was just yesterday, put out an email advertising those. So you would find links to the information on the Scottish Council on Archives website.
I'm sure that we can send you a link to those. Actually, I think they're happening on Mondays. They're half-hour sessions. So you might find that those are really useful. Actually, for they're more to do with expertise and process. Whereas I think what you were asking a little bit about advocacy as well, advocating to organisations how to the importance of having good archives. But I think you'll find those. I agree. Thanks, Phil. I think you'll find those sessions really useful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lucy's just put a link up there as well for the Community Archives website, communityarchives.org.uk. Lucy, I noticed you've put a question up here, which I think is gradually disappearing up the chat there. You're involved with a community heritage group, and it would be good for everyone to have the chance to have a go. We'd get a variety of voices, but perhaps then the style might vary a bit between different episodes. I'm thinking we could perhaps have one or two consistent presenters for the intro and the summary and sign off. Any thoughts? Just a couple of thoughts from me there. Those couple of podcasts that I mentioned that are, let me just get them back up here. The More Podcast, Less Process and An Archivist's Tale are exactly that. There are the presenters introduce and interview, but then there's a whole variety of people who speak. And actually, I don't think there's a huge problem in there being a variety of speakers, as long as you've got some consistency in something else. So the structure is always the same, or the intro and the outro are always the same. As long as you've got something which people can sort of hook into a brand identity, as it were, then I think that's sufficient. otherwise, it's great to have a huge variety of voices. I think I agree with some of the other comments that came in there about how, yes, everyone should have a go at this, and not just the one or two who feel confident to do it in the organization. It's a new skill to learn, really.
Thanks very much. Yeah, no, as I'm thinking about it, that sort of, I can see how you could put something together which had a sort of, a kind of consistent feel throughout it, even if different people are involved in the actual, what they're talking about. But yeah, no, thanks very much. The talk's been really interesting. I'm starting to get some ideas of what we could possibly do. So helpful. Thank you.
We're gonna finish up in a couple of minutes. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up? We've got a link down there to the community archives, the webinar series there for you, Alex, and anyone else who's interested in that.
I have got one more question, actually.
Sure.
Yeah. These podcast hosts, do they archive the podcasts that they have, or is it up to you to archive your own?
I think you've got the same issue that you have with social media. Facebook has been around since 2005. Yeah. So people who've been on Facebook for a long time now have a huge history of photographs and interactions with people, but it's held by this private company, and at the press of a button that can all disappear. Now, podcasts are kind of the same. They won't archive your content forever, and I think that it's important that you have copies of all of the material that you produce, and don't rely on a host to be a repository of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for taking part today. Robert tells me that there was a waiting list of 84 people for this session. So I'm delighted that podcasting is so interesting to everyone, and I hope that those lucky few of you who managed to get through the filter into the session have found it useful. Do be in touch with me if there's anything that I can help you with more specifically around this. And I look forward to seeing you again.